Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And Dr. Lopkin, I'm sure, well, we've all had bad weeks before, but I think Mamala or Kamala, her week, her past week, and it continues, it ain't going well.
No, it really isn't. And I don't know that it's a bad week. This just keeps seeming to happen every time she opens her mouth. This is why they were following the basement strategy and not having her do interviews.
No question about it, but this is more gut wrenching, whatever you want to call it. It's like totally tone deaf. She's running on Turn the Page, and actually, a New York Times poll had her up on that issue about changing direction, whatever, new blood, whatever you want to call it. So, what does she do on the View? She goes, "No, I wouldn't change a thing." Hmm.
Yeah, she's been saying she's not going to change anything. She says, she hasn't changed her opinions. Meanwhile, Biden came out and said point blank she was an integral part of every decision. She was the last person in the room. She was right there with every decision they made.
Your thoughts on that, Dr. Lopkin, please.
Well, first of all, it shoots her in the foot for saying she's the change agent. Clearly, she isn't. She's, essentially, she's been in office for the past 3.5 years and done nothing positive for the country. And she just said on The View she's not going to change anything, which means she's still not going to do anything positive for the country. In terms of Biden, I think Biden wants her tied very closely to his administration because he's starting to see, well, they forced me out because they said I couldn't win. Well, she's just as bad. She's the responsible for all the same things. So if I can't win, there's no way I'm letting her win.
I agree with that. I heard another really good analysis about Dr. Jill, the fake doctor, but how she might be behind a lot of this because she's pissed. And it was a great critique that her whole life has been immersed in mediocrity. Oh, yes, I get it. The senator's wife, but he was the joke senator, the joke VP. No one really took him seriously. Maybe at a party he might have been funny. She's now got the power, got the prestige, and the palace coup, which Kamala was a part of, she's now just relegated to Zippo. Plus a failed administration, a one-term administration. Any way you slice it, is still a failed administration.
Well, it's definitely a failed administration, but we're starting to see what really went on behind the scenes with the Democratic Party. For years people have said, "Oh, Biden is just Obama's puppet." And I have pushed back against that because Obama and Biden did not like each other. They did not get along. If Obama told Biden to do something, Biden would do the opposite. Now, however, you've got all of Obama's advisors backing Harris. And let's not forget the fact that Obama was a major factor in that palace coup. So
No
now
doubt.
we're seeing this is really going, he's trying to get his third term by putting Harris in. Every time she opens her mouth, she's showing that she's not capable of making these decisions on her own. So she's the one that's really trying to be Obama year, term three.
Oh, there's no question about that. But I still, to the original point, believe that Dr. Jill is intimately involved in putting the bug in Biden's ear, saying that she screwed you, Obama screwed you. They're trying to run away from you, meaning discrediting your administration. Give it to them, and I think he's done very little, anything positive. But I have to give him credit. It was a great backhanded compliment that puts her in a very precarious position, and he does
Well,
it on purpose. You got to
I,
give the guy credit
I'm
for that.
I'm sure he did that on purpose, and yes, I'm sure Jill is egging him on to do this. She's been mediocre all her life. Even as first lady, she was a mediocre first lady for a mediocre president. And he again, he's got every right to be pissed about them pushing him off. And it's even worse because during Harris's appearance on The View, Whoopi Goldberg referred to Joe Biden as the acting president. It's like, no, he's the one people voted for, allegedly. He's not an acting president. He was elected president. Harris is the one that no primary voter supported. She did not win a single primary vote either in 2020 or 2024. So she's the one who would be an illegitimate president.
I agree with all that. And I just wanted to reiterate one real quick point is that Dr. Jill, yeah, mediocre, maybe worse than mediocre. Some of the things she did, like the Christmas video, was like gut wrenching. It was ridiculous. But the point is now she went from rock star. I didn't say she was good. I'm saying
Right.
everyone at her beck and call, and now she goes to Delaware with a senile ex president pooping in his pants. And unlike even Nixon, a disgraced president, but interviews, you know, um, accolades, he's going into oblivion. He's going to the beach, and that's the end of it. No one's going to ask him for an interview. He's the book. If he ever, well, he wouldn't write it. The ghostwriter. No one's. It would sell like. And speaking of that, how's your book doing? The book you contributed on.
My book is actually an international bestseller in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada.
As it should be. My hat is off to you as always, Dr. Lopkin. But do you agree, unlike your book, if Numbnuts wrote a book, there'd be like, I guess in the publishing business, you can, fake some sales, free books or whatever. But other than that, it'd be like 200 people buying the book. And you'd have to question, and those readers would be the same readers that watch The View. In other
Well,
words, mentally disabled.
at this point, I don't even think he's capable. I mean, obviously, most of these books are written by
No,
ghostwriters
he
for
would have a ghostwriter.
politicians. But
There's not even any question
I
about that.
don't even think he's capable of doing that because the ghostwriter has to do interviews with the subject, to get the content for the book. And Biden isn't capable of remembering at this point. We've seen that over and over again. So I don't, and that's another reason why he's not being asked to do interviews and why he's not on the campaign trail. Because every time he opens his mouth, it is clear that he is not coherent and not in charge. And unfortunately, now every time Harris opens her mouth, she's showing she's no Mensa candidate either. And there is a great meme going around the internet that it is a picture of Oprah from the interview that she did with Harris, face absolutely shocked. And the caption reads, "Oh, that look you get when you realize Biden was the smart one."
Oh no, I think that's hysterical, and that is actually true. If you watch the interview, it was all huggies and kissies, and then there's literally sometimes you just can't fake it. Open mouth, like this, and then they did an African American. I forgot what the event was. Some or news organization.
The
And
National,
after
the National Association of Black Journalists.
And when she was done, they looked at each other like in shock. So my question is the important thing for our listeners, what is the end game? Because she can't go radio silent. There is no COVID. She's already done interviews. She did that what I'm on top or I'm your daddy, like frivolous, stupid,
Yes.
and that bombed. And that bombed.
Yes, she did. She did the podcast Call Her Daddy, which
yes.
she was absolutely horrific on. She did Stephen Colbert, which she basically looked like she was a tone deaf fool. And the only interview she's done of any substance was
60
the
minutes.
60 Minutes interview, and they ripped her apart.
Oh no, I forgot the guy's name who did the interview. I give him credit. He actually had follow, unlike CBS and ABC. And I'm telling you, she was like a deer in the. It was unbelievable, and they edited it. I mean, the raw footage must be like shocking. So my question to you: what is the end game? Because we got a month left. What does she do? Let me just say one thing before you answer. I actually that she can't. You can say, well, she can do. I'm on top and all that crap, whatever. Who's your daddy? But that ain't gonna fly for a month. So she's in. She's got, and she can't do that because she's already has juxtaposed to going forward. She has now like those previous interviews that make her. She's in a downward spiral. She's got to do more. She's got to redeem herself in some way. Your thoughts?
I think she will continue to do interviews, but she will not do anything as substantial as 60 Minutes anymore. She'll do more appearances like Colbert. She'll do Howard Stern that just pitches her softballs, but she's doing what they call feel good interviews. There's not going to be any substance. It's all going to be, look at me, I'm not Donald Trump. And that's her whole campaign at this point. I'm not Donald Trump.
I don't think that works anymore. I think a lot of the Trump hatred, yeah, there's a nutcases I get, but I think his approvals are going up. But talk about, I assume being from New York, used to listen to Howard. What the hell? And even like Tucker Carlson, others said the same thing. Rogan said, what the hell happened to that guy?
Yeah, it is absolutely amazing. And, for our younger listeners that did not get to listen to Howard Stern when he was on terrestrial radio, before the days of Sirius XM, he was known as the original shock jock. He
He was
was
funny.
politically incorrect. He had women flashing their breasts on the show. He had, everything about him was against the man and flaunting authority. And all of a sudden, he's the politically correct one. He's the one going, oh my God, no, we have to, kowtow to. I don't know
Yeah, but
what
I told you
happened to
we need
him.
to also focus on irrelevancy. He had. I was in Philadelphia when his first branch off was into Philly. He destroyed a morning show called The Morning Zoo. It was like an electrocution. That guy was so effing funny. Sometimes I almost went off the road and talk about being politically correct. But towards as this thing progressed, he basically had a listening audience of I don't know, like 10 million. Philly, New York, L.A., Chicago. I mean, he had a
Yeah,
huge audience.
when he went into syndication before moving to Sirius XM, he had radio stations all over the country
Yes,
playing, and he was generally number one in every market he was in.
everyone.
He had a television show. He had a syndicated show, and then he had a show on E Entertainment that was basically just the radio show where they set up a camera while they were while they were doing that day's radio show. He had a
Plus pay
book.
per view.
Right. He had pay-per-view. He had books. He called himself the king of all media, and he really was. And now most people don't even know who he is anymore.
That's the funny
And
thing
and
about
yet
it.
he's
I say
hanging
anyone
he's
under
hanging
40,
on, desperate for the attention.
I agree with all of that. And I don't know what his listening audience is, but it's well under a million. That you could put a gun to my head. No question.
Oh, I'm sure of that because Sirius XM is not what it used to be, and it doesn't
No,
have that many listeners anymore.
no, not at all. People that are doing their own thing, basically listening to podcasts like ours or Pandora, you name it, their own playlist. Yeah, no, serious radio. If you actually negotiate with them, you can get it for like almost nothing. Um, but it is interesting that we remember the October surprise with Bush. It was Iran negotiations or payoffs, and it's been a long list of stuff. Some analysts say the new October surprise is the hurricane and the ineptitude of Harris and Biden. And she's gone with North Carolina. That's finished.
Yeah, this has been said over and over again. And what really amazed me is that when questioned about the ineptitude of the FEMA response, Karine Jean Pierre lashed out saying it was misinformation and then stormed out of the briefing room. I mean, this
She
is
got
how.
promoted, by the way.
This is right after she got a promotion to senior advisor. Talk about failing upwards. But this
They
is
wanted her off the stage in a good way. That's why.
no, she's
Go
not
ahead.
going off the stage. She's
Oh, she's
keeping
not.
no, she's keeping the job
Excellent.
as press secretary even
Nice.
with the promotion.
Beautiful. I thought it was a way of nicely getting rid of her, but I stand corrected. Won't
No,
be the first time.
they're keeping her there. But no, the response from FEMA has been absolutely abysmal. You have Kamala Harris going on television saying that she wants to give hundreds of millions of dollars to Lebanon, which is giving it to terrorists because Hezbollah is in control of
Hello.
Lebanon. But they're claiming FEMA doesn't have the resources to deal with Hurricane Helene, and they think Congress needs to come back so that they can vote more funding for it. Well, if you have the money to give these hundreds of millions to Lebanon, why don't you just give it to FEMA?
That's their constant shtick is they say the border. No, no, they effed up the border and they can un-eff it up, which they did just
Right.
for the election. They always do that. But you know what's really interesting, funny, and sad, whatever you want to say? DeSantis, whatever you think of him, he's not a dumb guy. So the moron, Mamala, tries to rattle his cage, and that didn't work out too well. I don't know if you heard any of that.
Well, no,
He handed her. Go
not
ahead.
only didn't it work out, but Biden made a statement
Yes.
on DeSantis's side saying, "No, DeSantis has my personal number. We've been in communications. Everything's going well with DeSantis." And Harris was left hanging.
Yes, I think it's. What do you think of this? You talk about in the since been 30 years since Republican affiliate or people that associate themselves or identify themselves as Republican is now outpacing Democrats, as well as early registrations, ballot requests, so on and so forth. What do you think of that? And also, Mark Halpert said that who's a very respected person in the polling and political arena, basically was relaying information that there's an absolute panic, internal pollings, other things in the Harris camp. And I believe that's true, by the way.
Yeah,
I do
Halpert
believe
has.
that's true.
Yeah, Halpert's been saying that for a while, and for our listeners who are not familiar with the name, Mark Halpert used to be an advisor to Hillary Clinton, so he is a well-respected Democratic pollster. This has been going on more and more because the Democratic pollsters are realizing that Trump supporters don't trust the polls and they're not responding. Meanwhile, they're seeing voter registration for the first time in 30 years. More people identify as Republican than Democrat. And I honestly don't think that Trump has anything to do with that. I think the problem is what we've heard over and over again from diehard Democrats. I didn't leave the party left me. And they went so far to the left that centrist Democrats are going, I can't be part of this anymore. Most people don't understand the nuance of being an unaffiliated voter. They go, well, you have to be either a Republican or a Democrat. And if you can't be a Democrat, they're switching over to the Republican Party.
Yeah, I think that, and also Dick Morris, yeah, his time, his A game might have gone away, but I think he's had some good insights. I've listened to him before and other unrelated or related issues. And also, no, 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 it escapes me. Very, very well respected guy. I'll think of it in a second. I'm having a senior moment. But Dick Morris and another person I watch a lot on YouTube, Victor Hansen, sorry about that, believe that this is very reminiscent, this period of time right here. It's very reminiscent of Reagan, Carter, 1980, where things were really, really tight, 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 and then they just broke open. I actually do believe that. I actually really do.
Yeah,
And you look at the rally with Trump, 100,000 in Butler with Elon Musk. He's 2 points ahead in Pennsylvania, and he's planning an October 27th, and it'll be sold out if it does happen. Rally at Madison Square Garden. Talk about an FU.
yeah, that's big because national Republicans generally don't campaign in New York. And I think that's what we're seeing. Yes, it is very reminiscent about 1980. Insiders have said repeatedly that this feels a lot like 2016 rather than 2020. Remember, in 2016, the polls had Hillary winning in a landslide. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, it didn't happen. And they're
And
seeing
she's
this
still
more and
drinking
more.
to this very day, isn't she?
Yes, she still has not
Funny.
accepted the laws.
No. Go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah, we're seeing that more and more. And if you pay attention to the language that especially the Harris campaign is using, but certainly the DNC is using, it's very telling because they all say now, on last week's podcast, I explained the differences in the types of polls. If you pay attention, they all say, well, Harris is up in the national polls. And she is. She is up in the national polls.
Not all of them.
The problem, no, no, no. Almost all of the national polls. She may not be up beyond the margin of error, but she is up in pretty much every national poll. I think the only one she's not right now is Rasmussen. But
And the Atlas poll. But anyway, go ahead.
right, yes, but the national polls are irrelevant because the national polls are weighted to give a national. Well, guess what? Yes. Why is she ahead in the national polls? Because she's ahead in California, because she's ahead in New York City, because she's ahead in Chicago, all of these major population centers. Well, guess what? First of all, we've already stated the pollsters are saying Trump supporters don't answer the polls. So that right there is skewing for Harris. But more than that, we already assume, and if you look at every political pundit, the assumption is Harris has already won California. Harris has already won New York, which may or may not be true. Harris has already won Illinois. These are deep blue states. When they talk about who's going to win the election, they focus on Pennsylvania, on Wisconsin, on North Carolina, on Georgia, on Arizona. Well, none of these the only ones of these that Harris is ahead in is within the margin of error. And again, since pollsters are saying that Trump supporters are not responding to the polls, within the margin of error means Trump is ahead.
Yeah, I actually believe that Trump's going to win the popular vote. Call me crazy. That's absolutely fine. Won't be the first time. And here, I believe it's worse than 2016 and 2020 because back then, they didn't trust the pollsters, blah, blah, blah. Now Trump has solidified himself as FU to the man. So anyone that's voting for Trump, it's more than just I don't trust, it's FU. And there is a difference to that.
Yeah. And the Democrats know something is going on that their polls are not showing. The DNC has sent people and money to Connecticut, which is deep
Yes.
blue. They've never done that before because they've never felt a need. Adam Schiff in California raised so much money, he's using that money not for his campaign, but to bolster California Democrats who are struggling. The fact that a California Democrat is struggling hasn't been heard since the possibly the early 90s.
Early 90s, 100% correct.
Yeah.
But even in here in our little deep blue Connecticut, you have what's George Logan.
George Logan, yes.
He, yeah, George Logan is beyond the margin of error. He's down 1 point. 1 point.
Yeah, they are starting to have to fight battles that they never fought before. And it's primarily because one, this was the Biden Harris administration. We've all seen the result. There's no, oh, well, she says she's going to do something. No, we know what they're going to do. We're living through it. The same with Trump. It's not, oh, what is he saying he's going to do? No, we lived through the Trump administration. We know what he's going to do. We know the economy was better. We know crime was down. We know the border was secure. And we know there
May I ask
weren't
you a
all these
question for
wars all over.
our listeners? Again, I think we need to double back a little bit. How impactful was it when Kamala said that she wouldn't change a thing, and when Biden said she was in lockstep with him and was the last person that to leave the room? Please tell our listeners
I
how
well,
big.
honest honestly, I don't think the single comment was that impactful. The fact of the matter is most people aren't watching a single interview. The fact that she keeps repeating that she hasn't changed her opinion, that she wouldn't change anything, the fact that that is being amplified on social media, the fact that 60 Minutes actually pushed back against her, the cumulative effect is going to be massive, because I don't think it's going to affect the polls any, because the people who are answering the polls on both sides, they're diehards. The folks that are undecided, they're not answering polls. The folks that are they're not answering the polls. But what you're
I think it's also
seeing,
the FU factor
yeah,
too. And
what
there's
you're
just came
seeing
across
though,
the
and where the impact is really going to be felt is the enthusiasm. It's, well, I don't really want to vote for Harris, so maybe I'll just stay home. That, I think, is where you're going to see it. It's not going to affect the polls or anything, but I think it will affect the turnout.
I would agree with that. And also on the wire, talking about the Mark Halpern article, it just was rebroadcast, whatever you want to say. Political analyst, private, which is him, private polling shows Kamala Harris is in huge trouble. And getting to your point, yes, national polls have her ahead in the national vote count, but swing states she's increasing. And the other thing that I'd like you to comment on is the direction of things. If it was static and she's up here, down, but the trends are huge. Look at the Vegas odds. It was her up 2 weeks ago.
All of
All
yes,
things
all of the
combined are not
yes.
good.
Now, all of the Vegas odds right now have Trump winning. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, there is a big difference between the private polls and the public polls that the media keeps reporting on. The public polls have not changed their methodology uh, probably in at least 25 years, if not more. And we actually discussed this while we were on terrestrial radio back in 2016, because the public polls, the Quinnipiacs, the Rasmussens, the New York Times CBS polls, they're all based on demographics. What Trump did in 2016, his own the campaign's own polls, They focused on psychographics, which is much more powerful and more accurate. And that was why he was not surprised when he won in 2016, but the rest of the world was, because they weren't looking at the right figures. And this is pushed by the Democrats because they have been all about identity politics. It's, oh, young people have to come to the Democrats. No, in fact, the young people have basically the exact same split between Democrat and Republican as older people. It's about the Hispanics. Well, guess what? They're losing that demographic. They're now, it looks like 50-50 in the Hispanic voters are split between Democrat and Republican. African American voters, they're still overwhelmingly Democratic, but there's a larger percent that's now voting Republican. So these traditional demographic blocks that the Democrats have always relied on aren't solid anymore.
No, they are not. And it's funny how we talked about the potential for a Madison Square Garden rally on the 27th. Well, hold on to your hat because it's just officially been booked. And why is that important? Because it's going to capture the news. Plus, something that I find very interesting, you could say New York, it's over. You know, what's the point? Well, people don't realize New York has a big reach in terms of Pennsylvania, Bucks County, Philadelphia, even New Jersey.
Yeah,
So it's
having
just plus the attention it gets.
yeah, having an event in New York City is not about the local market. Now, to be fair, there are people that are actually speculating Trump may flip New York. I still say that's a long shot at best, but New York is the largest media outlet in the country. You hold an event in New York, it is covered all over the world. It is all over the country. It is in the
Can you interject just one thing real
international
quick,
press.
real quick, especially Madison Square Garden. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yes,
doesn't that play a role?
it does. Madison Square Garden is iconic, and that is going to get press coverage all over. And they're going to see not the people at the rally, because the fact of the matter is people around the country probably don't realize this, but Madison Square Garden is not as big as people think. So there's not going to be that big a presence in the rally, but you're going to see the crowds of people that can't get in. And that's been a factor at every Trump rally. There's always that massive overflow. Well, in New York, just imagine what it looks like on camera. Those crowds not filling up some field in Pennsylvania or filling up, outside of a stadium, but in the streets of New York, effectively blocking
God,
traffic.
great point, Lopkin. No, that's not a minor point. Plus the spillover when they start interviewing African Americans, Latino, let's say, those demographics that you just alluded to, and they're like, man, yeah, I'm voting for Trump, man. And yeah, that's another
Yes.
thing I want you to talk about real quick. I really believe you talk about the Democrats were the party of cool and blah blah blah. I think the cool factor's totally on the Trump side.
Oh,
Totally.
without a doubt. I'm blanking on who it was. An old time punk rocker has came out, and he was talking about the fact that Trump is the punk rock president. He is fighting the establishment. He is against the man. And this is
No
what
doubt.
the Democrats always were, going back to the 60s. They
Yeah,
were
Loggins,
and
all that. Yep.
yes, they were anti-establishment. Well, now the real anti-establishment movement is behind Trump. And that is a major shift. People don't see the Democrats as the party of the people anymore. And To
But
be fair,
look who they
Bernie's
have.
to be fair though,
Hillary.
Bernie Sanders himself has been saying that the Democrats have not been the party of the people for 15 years.
That is correct. And look who they have as their talk about uncool Elizabeth Warren. I think Bernie, his time is that ship has sailed. A Hillary. It's like Whitman. These people are about as unattractive. I don't mean physically. I'm talking personality wise, as like walking on nails.
Yeah, and
The
that's
charisma of lead.
that is something that I can't fully explain it, but I think they're actually trained to do this. Because if you watch Tim Waltz's interviews, Tim Waltz said point blank in his last interview, that I saw clips of, that he doesn't make personal attacks. Yet, if you watch the vice presidential debate, his entire answer to the first question, which was about Israel, were personal attacks on Donald Trump. It's like they are trained to do this as soon as the camera turns on. Just go attack. Hillary, of all things, recently doubled down on her deplorables comment, which cost her the election, saying she now feels she was too lenient calling these
Yep.
people deplorables.
And the media should do a better job in censoring conservative thought. Same thing with Kerry. How did Kerry get into Harvard? How the hell did he is
He bought his way.
dumber than rocks.
He bought his way in
God,
the
is he
same way
one
most
dumb
people get into Harvard.
dumb shit. But it is you talk about the time of this time of the year. It is the 1 year anniversary of the October 7th massacre, kidnapping. Your thoughts? And go your thoughts. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, this has been an amazing turn of events because we have seen anti Semitism in the United States increase by 200% over the last year, according to reports from the Anti Defamation League. At the same time, you have President Macron of France calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Meanwhile, Hezbollah has never been weaker. Israeli forces took out Nasrallah, who was in charge of Hezbollah for, I believe, 25 years or so. They took out his successor, and they took out the person that was going to succeed that successor. Hamas is in hiding. They're still firing missiles, but they're hunkered down in bunkers. The Ayatollah of Iran was moved to a bunker and nobody has heard from him since because he's afraid Israel is going to get to him inside of Iran.
Yeah, and speaking of Iran, I think that whole boogeyman, there's still something to be reckoned with. But their missile strikes, certainly Israel one-upping them and all their strategic initiatives. I think there's been sometimes be careful what you wish for. That whole I think it blew up in Iran's face. I think Israel's come out of it much stronger. I think if Trump gets reelected or back in office, I think it could be a great time in the Middle East with a very much crippled Iran that is running on fumes in terms of the regime. The people hate him. It's a
Yeah,
house of cards. If
I
it
I
wasn't for
actually
Biden and Obama, it'd be gone.
yeah, I actually predict if Trump wins, and he goes through bringing back all of the sanctions against Iran and crippling them economically, I will make the prediction that the Iranian people will actually rise up. In fact, the Shah's son, and again, the Shah was ousted from power back in the 70s by the religious fanatics in Iran. But his son, who has been in exile all of this time, has been broadcasting into Iran calling on the military to turn on the Ayatollah. I think if they get crippled economically by sanctions, if Hezbollah and Hamas can, and the Houthis now, can no longer defend Iran, I think you're going to see the Iranian people rise up.
100%, and it could be a golden era in the Middle East because they are really the big, the big gap, the big hurdle for basically. I mean, Trump almost had it, but until numbnuts screwed it up.
Yeah, and you're also, I think, going to see a turn in the proxies because the deal, as far as anybody knew, with Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran was, Iran was funding them, and Hamas and Hezbollah were going to protect Iran, but they were led to believe that Iran was going to have their backs. Well, Israel is demolishing them, and Iran hasn't had their backs. That's going to sow dissent. I don't think it's going to turn Hamas and Hezbollah, against Iran in favor of Israel by any stretch of the imagination. But I think if Iran faces an uprising at home, they're not going to have the support from their proxies that they thought they would.
Absolutely. Now, before we go, I think you need to address this. Your final thoughts on where the election is and where you think it's going. I think it's imperative.
Right now, I think Trump is actually ahead, but not by much. There's still a huge amount of Trump derangement syndrome, and it's still being perpetrated by the media. And that is a problem. We are starting to see the media finally get tough with Harris. And if that continues, I don't think she'll recover. But right now, I think Trump has the edge, but Trump also has the ability to shoot himself in the foot.
Let me position it this way from my perspective. Trump, I give him a 60% chance of victory if he does what you, and that's a big if,
No.
he shuts the you know what up. I give him a 60% chance. Do you agree with that?
Well, actually, if he continues
If he
with the
shuts,
rallies and does not, again, doesn't shoot himself in the foot and doesn't say anything really stupid, Nate Silver actually gave him a 70 to 75% chance of winning.
when was
So
that? That's important.
that was a week ago, maybe 10 days.
Because that has changed. Because no, because let's say 2 weeks ago he had it pro Harris by razor. So if he's back at 70, that's the highest he's ever been.
Yeah,
That's huge.
Nate
And betting markets are the same.
Yeah, Nate Silver's been going back and forth because Nate Silver's methodology depends on the other polls. Honestly, I think the Vegas betting odds are more accurate, and they've been saying Trump's got this.
Yes, and increasing. And again, I've heard pollsters and experts say yes, static is static, but trends are even more important.
Yes. And
Dr.
the
Lopkin,
trend does not seem to be favoring Harris at this point.
and how does she recover from this, Dr. Lopkin? Because the more she talks, the more she not appear, the more she unveils herself as the moron she is. Law school, I don't know where she went to law school.
Yeah, I
I have
honestly
no
don't
idea.
know how she can recover other than spending a week hitting the books and actually making this last minute push where she surprises everybody actually knowing something.
I'm not sure she has the intellect.
I
I'm dead
I,
serious. That's
I
not a
don't
joke. That's not a joke.
I honestly
No, I'm
don't
really serious.
I honestly don't think it's a problem of her intellect. I'm not saying she's a Mensa candidate, but her own people that worked with her as vice president have said time and time again she does not want to put in the work. She doesn't want to make the effort. And I think that's what we're seeing. She doesn't want to do her homework.
I agree because I think her whole life's been, even though she claims a working class background, has been all about her entitlements. Where she grew up, who her parents were, her clean path from school to Willie Brown. The rest is history. So exactly, cracking the books hasn't been a big part of
All
her
right.
shtick,
And
including the fact that she flunked the bar exam. There you go.
there have actually been folks that are speculating that she does not want to be president. She wants the title of president, but she doesn't want to actually have to do the job. And that
I would
is
not argue with that.
frightening.
I would not argue. Yes, she wants other people doing the work for her as she goes out to parties with the Hamptons with Obama.
Yes,
Well, I believe that our podcast is doing quite well lately, hasn't it?
we are. We're picking up. And of course, we want to hear what you have to say. Go to the Carnivore Radio Facebook page, message us, let us know what your thoughts are. You can also go to xvadio.com/connect. Let us know what you're thinking. Who do you think is going to win? And why do you think that? And of course, while you're there, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
I thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and we'll get it together again next week.
We'll see you then.